So today's daf in Masechet Sanhedrin is Pei Aleph, I believe, right? Am I correct? 81? Okay, good. It's great. Wonderful. Well, Shavua Tov, everyone. So we're up to the Mishnah. I believe that's what we got up to. And the Mishnah says, on top of daf Pei Aleph and Aleph, 5 lines down, Mishnit Chayav b'shtei mitot peitin. Person who's chayav two different punishments. We'll see what that means as we get into the Gemara, how you can be chayav two punishments. Nidon b'chamura, you get the stricter one. So if you did something that's chayav skila, or something that's chayav, sayif, let's say, you get skila, which is more chamor. Avar avera chayav shtei mitot. Now, if you're over one act that's chayav two different things, right? And this is very easy in znut. You can be related to someone in many ways, or they can be an eshetish. You sleep with someone, or you're over an avera that you're chayav two mitot, then nidon bechamura, you get the stricter punishment. That's the Tanakama. So let's say you slept with the person who's an eshetish and your mother-in-law. It's an example of the Gemara. You get punished for mother-in-law, which is skila. Rabbi Yossi says, I disagree. Nidon bezikar harishona sheba'ayla. You get the first one that came, meaning if this woman was first usher to you for an eshetish, then you get punished for that. If she was first usher to you for chamoto, or then we'll see in the Gemara the examples, but that's how you get punished. Says the Gemara, beginning pshita. This Mishnah seems pretty obvious, right? You have a person, they did something that they're chayav to be killed by chenek. They did something they're chayav to be killed by skila. The Mishnah says you give them the more chamer one. Of course, you give them the more chamer one. What are you going to say? Because they did a second avera, they get the less strict one? Like if they just done the skila, they would have gotten skila. Because they did a second one, says the Gemara, Ella, it's great. It's great. You think they're going to gain, they're going to profit by doing more averot? Of course you get the more chamer one. Amar Rava says, Rava, well, we're talking here about a specific circumstance. And the specific circumstance is, Hacha b'mayaskinan. This is talking about a case, Kigon she'avar avera kala. Person did a kal avera, and of course there's no avera kala, of course, but something that is chayav, a punishment of a mita beitin that's not as strict. So let's say chenek, okay? And he went to court, v'nigmar dino avera kala, and the court convicted him. Charlie, we're in the third line of the Gemara on Pei Aleph, meaning around 12 lines from the top. The person committed a sin that was an avera, we call avera kala, meaning a mita kala, so he's chayiv sechenek. He went to court, they convicted him, they haven't carried out the judgment yet. The avar avera chamura, and he does something stricter. He is mechal Shabbat, which is chayiv skila. So there's where our Mishnah said, you might have thought to say, like even to nigmar dino avera kala, that since we concluded his din already, that he's an avera kala, hi gavra katela, who he's a dead man, right? So meaning, at the time he did the second sin, he already was convicted and condemned to death. So maybe you don't apply or don't even judge him a second time. I mean, we don't even bring him to court to say, let's judge him for Chiyuv Shabbat because he's already a dead person. Kamashman, that you do. That if a person does a sin and he's alive, we would go to court and we would try to convict him. And if it was more strict, he would get that stricter punishment. Now, Boi Minei, Achva de Rav Yosef Bar Chama mi Rabba Bar Natan. The brother, we changed it to brother from father, of Rav Yosef Bar Chama asked the question of Rabba Bar Natan. Minaha milta damar Rabbanan, how do we know this principle? That's our Mishnah's principle, the Mishnah chayev shtei mitot beitin nidon bechamura. Someone who did two different actions, they're chayev two mitot beitin, they get the stricter one. That's a little strange question to ask, right? Because, we just said why. So Rashi says what he's asking was even where we just said it, not where you did both separately and then you come to court and say, which one do we punish you for? It's where you did the less strict one first, you had a Gemar din, and then you did the stricter one. So how do we know that such a person is chayav even the stricter punishment? And he said, Dichtiv, it's based on this fascinating nivuah in Yecheskel. It's a really incredible nivuah. If anyone has time or interest, I suggest you after Daf Yomi, because we can't do the whole thing now, look at the 18th parak of Yecheskel. It's a beautiful and sobering nivuah. But basically what happens in the 18th parak of Yecheskel is that the Navi comes to address the complaint, I think is the way he phrases it, that people say, which is that we have situations where avot yochlu boser, right? The fathers eat, boser means literally raw grapes, but bad things. Vishinei banim tikena, I think is the language. Shinei something tikena. The teeth of their children get knocked out, meaning we often find in life, according to those who ask the question of the Navi, that someone does a punishment and their descendants pay the cost. And that's not fair, right? So that's the injustice. So Yecheskel goes to address this. And Yecheskel goes into this long, long description about, look, some people are really bad. And he goes through a list of all the bad things people do. And we're about to quote that list. And then he goes and says, and then they have children, and the children are good, right? And children do all the opposite things. And they have grandchildren who are bad, meaning it's really based on the personal behavior, not what someone ahead of you did or does before you. And you can both do worse than your descendant, your ancestors, or better. So that's the whole parak. But in the list of the things that the person does wrong, now we're reading inside. Holid ben paritz, this person can be very, very good. And they give birth to a son who breaks, paritz literally means breaks down the boundaries. Now, we don't exactly know what boundaries he breaks down yet. Shofich dam, he kills people. We're skipping a little. El haharim achal, he eats in the mountains, we're going to discuss what that means, but maybe it means avodah zarah. Vet eshet re'eu timei, he sleeps with his friend's wife. Vet gilulim nasainav, he does avodah zarah, right? And so he does all these actions. So says the Gemara now, that's the end of the quote from the pasuk. Now we're going to analyze it. It says, Holid ben paritz shofich dam. You have a son who breaks all the rules, who slaughters people. That's saif, right? If you kill someone, you get chiyuv of saif. Then it says, at eshet re'eo tima. He slept with an eshet ish. That eshet ish, that's chenek. So he's chayev chenek. And then it said, El gilulim nasainav. He went and he did avodah zarah, zu avodah kochavim. That's skila. So basically, you got this really rotten kid who does everything. He kills people, he sleeps with the wrong people, he does avodah zarah. He's chayev many different mitot beitin. And the pasuk continues to chtiv, Mot yumat, that child will die, damav bo. Yeah, right? His blood is on him. Remember, we said earlier from Ovin Yidoni, wherever you say demehem bam or damav bo, it means beskila. So what you see from this verse in Yecheskel, on the side, is that if a person does many different averot, they get punished with the strictest one. Now, it can't be where you didn't take them to court, because that would be obvious. It must be where you had a conclusion. He killed someone, you condemned him to death. He slept with an eshet ish, you condemned him to death. He then went ahead and did avodah zarah. Now the pasuk is telling you that he would get skila in that circumstance. So this is a pasuk in Yecheskel that gives, obviously we don't learn primary things from Navi, but it's a remez, it's an indication of how we practice. Ask the Gemara, how do you know that's how to read the pasuk? Matkifla, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, how do you know those are the sins described in the pasuk? Ema kula b'skila. Maybe every sin described in the pasuk is skila. For example, Holid ben paritz shofich dam. You'll give a son who breaks the rules, who slaughters someone. Maybe it's not referring to a kid who actually commits murder. Maybe it's referring to zeb ben sorer moreh. Maybe it's referring to a kid who's going, as we learned in the last parak, he didn't commit murder yet, but he's going to commit murder, right? That's why we kill a ben sorer moreh. So he's going to be shofech dam and to be skila, that the punishment of member is skila. And then you said eshet re'eo tima, he slept with his friend's wife. Maybe that's not referring to a regular eshet ish. Maybe, that's referring to zunara marasa. It's referring to a specific circumstance of nara marasa, which is beskila. And of course, the avodah zarah is beskila. So maybe the reason this person gets skila is not because when you have 3 punishments, you get the strictest 1 or 2. It's because everything he did was skila. Says, well, maybe, but if that's the case, in Cain, my kamash b'lan Yecheskel. So what's the point of the pasuk? Saying, if the person commits 3 crimes for skila, you give him skila, right? What's the chiddush? Says, well, maybe Yecheskel is just reminding us. Dilma Torah kamahader. Maybe he's just reviewing the Torah. Maybe Yecheskel is not, remember, the point of Yecheskel, of course, is not to tell you the laws. It's to give you a nevuah about how God treats people fairly and treats their kids, etc. So, but maybe Yecheskel is repeating it to remind you, in case you forgot, the punishment for skila is punishment for avodah zarah, and etc. is skila. Says, well, that's conceivable. But in Cain, he should have told it to us the way Moshe Rabbeinu told it to us. Now, it's not very clear how did Moshe Rabbeinu tell it to us? So Rashi says, there's other opinions, of course, but Rashi says that similar to Mishnah Torah, where basically Moshe didn't tell it to us agav, in the side, right? Like, this is the story, and by the way, you get that. Moshe went over, this is my reading of Rashi, but there's others who read it that way, that Moshe went over the primary review, right? If you do this act, you get this thing. If you do that, meaning Moshe didn't tell it to us while he was speaking, right? He wasn't saying stories and teach things. He reviewed things in a clear way. So Yechezkel, if he was trying to review it, he would have just said, this is the law, right? This is how you practice. If a person does that action, they get that. Why would he say it in this way? So therefore, this is a question. So therefore, Yechezkel can't be telling us that you're just getting skila, right? So therefore, it's a good proof that in fact, it was referring to a circumstance where the person did 3 different averot for 3 different deaths. And Yechezkel's point is that you give him the strictest punishment, which is skila. Darish Rav Acha bar Rabbi Chanina. Rav Acha bar Chanina, while we're talking about these psukim in Yechezkel, Rav Acha bar Rabbi Chanina said, "My dichtiv." What does it mean when it says El Harim Lo Achal? That he didn't eat. Right. This is when we're saying the good, right? Meaning the person who doesn't do all these things wrong. So it says he doesn't eat in the mountains, right? What does that mean? You don't eat in the mountains. What's good about that? Says Rab Acha bar Chanina, Rabbi Chanina. Shelo achal b'schut avot, or on the side, the Gra changes it to b'shvil avot, meaning you didn't take advantage of your ancestors. You didn't eat things that you got because people were really happy with you didn't use your connections, so to speak. You did it on your own. So the person was pure. They didn't actually rely on other people. And then it says, Einav lo nasal gilulei beit Yisrael. This is a part of the pasuk that we skipped before. He didn't put his eyes on the Gilulei Beit Yisrael. What does that mean? Right? What does eyes have to do with anything? Shelo halach b'komaz kufa. That's referring to someone who didn't walk haughtily. They didn't look like someone who doesn't care. Their eyes were looking upwards, basically. And it says, Eshet re'eo lo tima. What does it mean? Now, again, we darshan before. Eshet re'eo lo tima means he didn't sleep with his friend's wife, right? But here, what else could it mean? Says Rav Acha bar Chanina. It means shelo yarad le'umnut chavero, right? Eshet re'eo here does not mean your friend's wife. It means your friend's business. That you didn't go and open a store. Your friend is selling, I don't know, phones, and you open another store, sells phones right next door to him. That's inappropriate. So again, this is the pasuk talking about all the good things that this person did. So he didn't eat things inappropriately. He didn't walk b'komaz kufa. He didn't start up with his friend. Vel eshet nida lo kirav. What that means.
Whereas Rashi said, mitoch shu chasid. Is that Lashon Sagi Nahor?
No, this is the one who's good.
Right. But it says mitoch shu chasid.
He did. Chasid
He didn't have to rely on his father's because it's saying that he's chasid, or is that Sagi Nahor that he's not chasid?
No, he is chasid. That the more independent a person is, the better. The less you rely on tzedakah or other people, the better off you are. So this person, again, this is the good person. So this person didn't do any of those things. He didn't rely on his father's reputation and money. He didn't, etc. Start with his friend's business. This last example of at Eshet, where Eshet Nida Lo Kirav, what that means is not obviously that he didn't sleep with a Nida, because that's not like a very righteous thing to not sleep with a Nida. It means Shelo Ne'aneh Mikupa Shel Tzedakah. It's saying that he didn't ever take money from tzedakah. Right? He didn't ever take anything. Now, nida in this context means something that it's better to stay away from. So it's ideal to stay away from money, from charity, if you can. So these are all compliments, basically, of this person. Vichtiv, and as it says, tzadikhu, this person, this righteous person, he's a tzaddik, chayo yichya, he will live. Right, and again, I should have read the psukim to you because it would be even better, but I don't have one. But basically, it's like 3 psukim. A person who does all these things, they don't eat from the hills, they don't, etc. Sleep with this person, they don't do this, they don't. I'm going to read some of it actually. Give me a second. I apologize. It's worth hearing. I think it continues the following. Right, it says asa. He's a kiyet tzaddik. Asam mishpat utzdaka. He does what's righteous and just. And then I'm going to skip the psukim that we already quoted. It continues. This is Parak Yudchat Pasuk Zayin. Ish lo yoneh, right? You don't take interest from somebody. Chov yashiv, you pay back all your debts. Gzela lo yigzal, you never steal. Lachmo l'ra'ev yitain, you give food for those who are starving. Erom yichaseh beged, for those who are naked, you give them clothing, or they need clothing. Neshech lo yitain, you don't give interest. Tarbit lo yikach. Me avel yashiv yado, you never do any injustice. Mishpat emes, emet yaseh, you do what's judgment which is accurate. Bein ish leish. B'chukotai yahalecho, you go in my pathways. Mishpatai shemor lasot emet. You do all these things. Then, now we're quoting inside now. Then the pasuk says, tzadiku, You're righteous. You will surely live. So says the Gemara, we are 12 lines from the bottom. When Rabbi Gamliel learned Yecheskel or read Yecheskel and got to this pasuk, he would cry and he would say, "Amar, look, pasuk says you do all these things. You don't steal, you don't cheat, you give money to the poor, you're just, you're righteous. That person will live. Man da'ava the kulahu dechai. It implies that someone who does all of these things is worth living. But if you miss one, if you're not just, you don't give charity, you don't do that, then you're not worthy of living. It implies that to get, to be acceptable, you have to do everything. So that was why Rabbi Gamliel would cry. Amalei Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said you fundamentally misread the list. Elamayata, because you got to look at the opposite. Think of the pasuk that we're going to have, I guess soon enough, about all the things you can't become tamei to. It says al titamu b'chol eila, and then it gives a list of all the things, all the shratzim, right? It doesn't mean don't become tamei to all of these, meaning you can't be tamei to everything in the list. It means anything in the list, right? What do you think? Hachanami bekulu in b'chadam minayolo? It's only a problem if you're tamei to everything on the list, not to one thing on the list. Ella ba'achat mikol ela. What it means in the Vayikra, it means don't be tamei to anything on the list. Here too, in Yecheskel, hachinami ba'achat mikol ela. Here too, what Yecheskel is saying that someone who does any of these things, any of these righteous acts, is worthy of living and is a tzaddik. Of course, you could be a greater tzaddik, but that it doesn't mean you have to do all of them. It means you do some of them or any of them. And so, anyways, that's obviously an agadita, but we use this agadita to learn that if a person does many things wrong, they get punished with the strictest of all of them. Okay, that was the first part of the mission. The second part of the mission, which we're up to the 2 dots now, 8 lines from the bottom, was let's say you do one avera, and there's multiple punishments for that avera, right? For example, Tanya, says the Braita, Ketzad, how can you do one avera and have many things? Ketzad Amar Reb Yossi nidom b'zika rishana ba'ilav. What does Reb Yossi mean that you get punished with the first zika, the first draw, or the first connection of the avera that comes to you? Let's say, for example, a person has a chamoto. Person has a mother-in-law, which is pretty common, right? And she's prohibited to sleep. He can't sleep with his mother-in-law. It's an isur skila. V'naset eshet ish. And she becomes married, but she was an almana, right? Or divorced, right? She wasn't married. He married her daughter. So at that moment, she became a chamoto. Then she got married. So now she's an eshet ish. So initially so now she's prohibited twice, right? But the first prohibition was chamoto. The second one was eshet ish. So then, where am I? Nidom b'chamoto. You get the punishment if you sleep with her of chamoto because it came first. But if she was first in eshet ish, she was married and then she became chamoto, right? He then married her daughter, b'naset chamoto, nidom b'eshet ish. Then you get punished, according to Rabbi Yossi, with the less strict one because that's why she was prohibited to him first, which was eshet ish, right? And as we have discussed, and we'll get to actually, hopefully, in a little bit of time, in Zvachim, this is based on the principle of ein isur chal al isur, right? If something's prohibited to you, like a woman who's your chamoto, or eshet ish, and then she becomes your chamoto, you don't add a second isur on top of the first one. Amrli Rav Bar Ava Rava said Rav Bar Ava to Rava. Why? I don't understand. Why in the world would you say that you don't add an isur on the first one? Let's say she's chamoto, right? She's your mother-in-law. She's prohibited to you because she's your mother-in-law. Then naset eshet ish, and then she gets married. So now it's true. It's a second prohibition on you, and generally we don't say we say ein isur chal al isur, right? A second prohibition of eshet ish won't be chal. But remember, if that second prohibition was broader than the first one, it can be chal, right? That's called isur mosif. If the second prohibition adds new details, then it can be chal. Why don't you say that here? Why don't you say that nidom b'chamoto? Why do you say that you get the first one, which is chamoto? Lidon namia isur eshet ish. Why don't you say that the prohibition of eshet ish also was effective on this woman and on him? The ha'amar Rabbi Avua, because we had Rabbi Avua, the moder Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi admits that even though ein isur chal isur, but isur mosif, turn the page to pay aleph on bet. You do add isur chal isur if the second isur adds on to the first one. So why would you say that if she's chamoto and then she gets married, she becomes usher to the whole world, right? The isur eshet ish now applies to every man in the world, right? Every Jewish man in the world. So why don't you say that it also applies to the guy who's her son-in-law? So, and therefore she should be usher. Says, well, that's fine, but what do you mean she should be usher? You're already going to kill him for chamoto. Well, you can't kill him twice. Amalei ada bri betray katli katlele. I don't get it. You're gonna kill him twice, right? You can't do that, obviously. So therefore, it doesn't make your question is not a good question. There's no Iser Mosif in this case because was initially a prohibition of skila from chamoto. Then it became whatever chenek from eshetish, but you're not going to add a second punishment. And the other way, if a woman is eshetish, she's already aser. If she then becomes chamoto, there's no Iser Mosif because she was already aser on the whole world from eshetish, right? And so the only place that it would really matter to have Isser Mosif in this context would be if you did it b'shogeg. And the question was, do you bring one carbon or two carbonot? And Rabbi Yossi would admit you bring two carbonot for this, right? Because Isser is chal Isser in this case, but you definitely can't kill a person twice. And so we kill them with the first punishment that came to them.
We had a whole discussion before in the Gemara. Reb Shimon, in fact, probably yesterday's daf, where day before that, if there were two punishments, and in fact for a few days, that we give the lesser punishment. If you decide whether it's chenek versus skila, in almost all, and yesterday's Gemara wanted to discuss that, and they said no, it was what came skila besreifa and nimsim niskalim besreifa
You mean if people get mixed up together?
No, I'm not. That's a separate thing. But we were
Right.
talking earlier but no, they wanted to say the Havamina was well, it should be the lesser penalty. But in that Gemara ended that it was because there was a majority. So, but before that, prior to that, we learned that if there were two penalties, the person, two types of death, the person gets the lesser one. If it's chenek versus
No,
skila,
that
there
again,
was a machlokas whether which was more chamor. That's Reb Shimon versus the Rabbanan. That's a separate issue.
so I think you're referring to a case before where we mixed people up. So we didn't know. Your people who were niskalim got mixed up with those who
That's
were.
something else. That's a later thing. I'm talking even before that. There was
So
a Havamina that what should we do in Niskalim Srafim. But that was just I brought that because the Gemara was discussing should he get the lesser penalty, but because based on an earlier Gemara where we learned that if there are two penalties, one gets the lesser penalty, whether it's chenek versus skila or whether it's chenek versus streif or whatever it might be.
So I think we're confusing things. I mean, we can find the Gemara and look at it, but what our Mishnah said is that if one individual does two punishments, do two things, you always get the stricter one. The question, the only exception Rabbi Yossi would say is if you did one act that involved two different punishments, then again, according to the Tanakama, it doesn't matter. You get the stricter punishment. According to Rabbi Yossi, if it's one act, then it depends on why the act was prohibited first. So, for example, if a woman was prohibited to you because she was an Eshetish, and then she became your mother-in-law because you married her daughter, then you slept with her, you would get the first punishment. But
Now
that's an exception.
that's two acts, but we're talking about
That's one act. One act. That's one act.
oh, it's one act, but it's two type of punishments, but potential. But if they were done separately, be two. But we
Correct.
learned earlier a week ago, let's say that if a person would isha morasa or other cases where if a person did we why because the Torah and it brought examples. It brought actually from Mishlei perhaps if I remember that we want to treat someone kindly, so we give them the lesser of the two death penalties. Gemara brought that clearly. That was what one way of justifying. If a person that we
Right.
would want to treat them was one way of being treating someone, showing our kindness to someone by giving him the lesser penalty.
So again, it's not. I think maybe you'll find the source for me. And I'm happy to go through it. There was a different question, which is when we didn't know what punishment to give, then we have to treat more kindly and do the less severe punishment. But our mission's case is where
Well,
you
I'm not talking
know.
about this mission. I understand this mission.
So our
I'm
mission is
saying
where
that
you know that someone did skila and you know they did chenek, then you give them skila. Now, the thing you said earlier, which we're about to get to a little more, is there is a machlok about what's stricter and what's less strict. That stands, right? What is the strictest punishment? But that's a different question.
that's entirely different. I'm not talking about that. That's Reb Shimon versus the Rabbanan, whoever it is.
Okay, let's continue with the Mishnah, the second line on Daf Pei Aleph Amud Bet. Misha lakav v'shana. Now, our Mishnah gets into a very interesting question, which is, what if a person does not seem to be deterred by the punishment we give them, right? So a person does a sin, he gets makot for it, right? We give makot to someone who does a sin, and then he does it again, and he gets makot again. So he's done it twice, and then he does it a third time, right? How do you punish him the third time? You've already punished him twice with makot. It doesn't seem to make much impact on this guy or a woman, right? So what do you do the third time they do the act? So it says the Mishnah, Mishalaka v'shana, and then he does it once and twice, and he gets makot both times. He does it again. Beit Din does not give him makot again. We found that's futile for this guy. What we do instead is machnisin oto lekippah. You bring him into prison. The kippah is like an enclosed room. Machilin oto sa'orin. You feed him just bad food like barley. Bakat until he dies, until his stomach cracks open. Okay, you basically kill him almost passively, but not that passively. So that's what the Mishnah says. Now, says Gemara, 1 second. What in the world are you talking about? Mishum delaka v'shana beitin kotzin kippah, right? I mean, the Torah says give him makot for something. All of a sudden now we're killing him. I don't. Seems like a little bit of an overreach over here. Amar Reb Yirmiyah, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Said Reb Yirmiyah and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. You know, you're right. Not every case of makot. Hacha b'malkiot shel kritot askinan. Here we're talking about a case where you give makot for iser of karet. Now we're going to see, we're going to have the next Masechta, Makot, where we talk about it. There are times where a person doesn't act like eating on Yom Kippur, let's say, where you're chayiv karet, right? If you give him hatra'ah for karet, then he gets karet, but obviously that's not, God fulfills karet. If you warn that person, you don't give them hatra'ah for karet, but you give them hatra'ah for makot, then you could punish them with makot. But they did an act that was an iser karet. So basically they did something which they deserve to be killed. Now, not mita of beit din. Karet is not in man's hand to take out, to fulfill. But it is a chiyuv of death. So in those cases, let's read inside now. The Gavra Bar Katalahu, he is really a person who deserves to be killed, and he is guilty, right? You concluded and you found that he really did the act. And Kruvi Hudalo Mikrav Katale, we just can't bring his death closer, right? God is the one who's in charge of killing him, essentially, and that's whatever timing God decides, right? That is the punishment. But kivan dekamivater la nafshe, but since he doesn't seem to care anymore, right? He's giving up and he's just doing this avera over and over, and we basically have a chazakah, which we'll get to in a second. We have a conclusion that he's going to keep doing it. So then we're allowed to be mitkarev mitato. Then makrivin lo lekatle ilabe. We're allowed to bring his death closer to him. So meaning we can give God a little bit of assistance in this case in terms of basically we're killing him, but we're killing him somewhat passively with the way that Beit Din is different. So basically he's chayiv an iser of karet, but and we wouldn't generally make his death sooner, but since he does it over and over and he doesn't seem to care, we punish him with death. So that's Rav Shimon ben Lakish's explanation. Amarle Rev Acha, where am I? Amalei, first wide line now. Amalei Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Tachlifa. Sir Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Tachlifa. I want to just explain to you. To Asbrilach, I want to give you a detail about our Mishnah. It's referring to Malkiot Shel Karet Achat. It's talking about where you did makot for an action of the same action, meaning you ate on Yom Kippur and you ate again and you ate again. That's where we give up on you, basically. We're like, you don't care about your life. You're chayiv death anyways. We will make it closer. Aval Shel Shtayim and Shel Shalosh Kritot. If you're chayav on karet and you get makot for 2 or 3 different acts, then we don't say that you're you're a recidivist, right? Because maybe suru de katam lomavater kulihai. Maybe you just want a chance to do the avera. Everyone wants to do something once or twice, right? So we wouldn't punish you for we punish you. We'll give you makot. We're not going to kill you, right? Because we don't assume that you're going to keep doing this thing. But if you do the same act 3 times, the 3rd time we're like, it's hopeless. There's no point in giving you makot. We might as well just get rid of you. That's our Mishnah. Now says the Gemara, what does that mean 3 times? Mishalaka v'shana. What you're saying is you did it a 2nd time, then the 3rd time we kill you. Which implies shana, you did it a 2nd time, meaning you were punished a 2nd time. Afagav delo shilesh, even though you weren't punished the 3rd time. So you didn't get makot 3 times and show makot was not effective. You only got makot twice. And so then the 3rd time you do it, we kill you. Lema matznitim to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. It implies that our Mishnah is unlike Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Remember, we've had a machloket all throughout Shas. How many times you need to do something for it to be a chazakah? According to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, it's 3 times, which is usually how we say. According to Rebbe, it's only 2. But it seems like our Mishnah is not going like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. You did it twice, you got punished twice, and you do it a 3rd time. We're like, you're hopeless. The Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, until it's 3 times, you don't get a chazakah. So maybe we should punish you a 3rd time. Maybe this time will stick. Amar Ravina, I feel the Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. No, our Mishnah is probably could be Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, because Savar Averot Machsikot. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is saying it's not the makot that will stop you, it's the sin. Once a person has done a sin 3 times, then we assume he's never going to stop doing that sin. So it's not because you got punished 3 times and you kept doing it. You got punished each time because that's how we punish you. But once you're committed to doing it and you do it a third time, we assume you're never going to stop doing it. And there's no point anymore in even giving you makot. You'll just do it again. We might as well get rid of you. That's the answer. Says the Gemara. There's a Braita that seems to argue with that. Meitve. What about the following Braita? The Braita says the following. This is the Tosefta. Avar avera shishba makot. A person does a sin that gets into makot, and we can understand it like our Mishnah, where it was chiv karet. Pam rishona v'shnia malkinoto. So the first time you punish him, the second time you punish him, but shlishit, if it's the third time, konsinoto lekipa. You bring him into the kippah to get killed. Abba Shaul Omer, no, Abba Shaul says, no, I disagree. Af b'shlishit malkinoto. You give him the third times, you also give him makot. It's the fourth time. B'revi'it konsin oto lekipa. Now, my understanding, says the Gemara, my love, the kuliyama malkiot machsikot. The most rational explanation of this Braita is that it's the makot that matter, right? And meaning when you give makot for a sin, a person should get the message and not do it again. If they do it a second time, they seem to be pretty convinced. And then the third time you punish them, or according to Abba Shaul, the fourth time. And the machloket between the Tanakam and Abba Shaul is beplukta the Rebbe, Rebbe Shimon Gamliel Kamiflagi. That's what they're arguing. Is 2 times enough to make a chazakah, which Rebbe says, and 3 times like Rebbe Shimon Gamliel, which imply that our Mishnah, which didn't quote Abba Shaul and only said the first opinion, is going not like Rebbe Shimon Gamliel. Says, well, that's not how I would understand the Braita. The Kuliyama, I understand the Braita that everybody holds, it's like Rebbe Shimon Gamliel. Everybody holds the mainstream opinion that it takes 3 times to make a chazakah. The machloket about whether it's the third time or the fourth time that you kill him is the mar savar averot machzikot or mar savar malkiot machzikot. The question is, what's the critical fact that shows you that a person's going to keep doing it? So if you hold it's the sin, then you do it twice and get punished. The third time you do the sin, you're stuck with the sin. You're a chazakah and you kill them. But if you say it's not the sin, it's the makot that really are the deterrent, right? Meaning they are the deterrent. Then you have to show that even though 3 times you got punished, you do it again. And so it would be the 4th time. But it's not a question of whether a chazakah is based on 2 times or based on 3 times. So that's how I would understand the Braita. Of course, you could understand it otherwise, but that's one way to explain it. What about the following Braita? Tanya, this Braita is very important. I mean, it's all very important, but it adds a context to our Mishnah, which is there are times where a court wants to punish someone, but they don't have the legal tools to do it. So what about the following case? Let's say hitrubo, you give someone hatra'ah v'shatak, and they're quiet. Right now, remember, as we said earlier, when you give hatra'ah, the person has to be mikabel hatra'ah. They have to say, I understand, I accept it. I know that if I do this act, I'm going to be chayav skila. Let's say they're smart enough not to want to get killed, and they say they understand. So you know they understand because they nod their head. Because if they didn't understand, then they're not chayav because maybe they didn't really get it. But they indicate that they got it, right? They're quiet. They don't nod their head, but they're quiet. But they look you in the eye, right? Or hitrubo v'hirchin rosho, right? That this is the second case. You give them hatra'ah and they nod their head, but they don't say back to you, I know. Then you can't kill him. So now the problem is that he's a pretty bad person, and you know that he does this avera even though he knows it's wrong. So says the Braita, Pam rishona v'shniya matrinbo. The first 2 times you give him hatra'ah and you keep trying to warn him. But shlishit konsinoto lekipa. If he does it a 3rd time, you stick him in the kippah, right? You stick him in prison to be killed because you know that you don't really have a legal basis for it, but you sort of have a very good sense that this guy's not going to stop. And that's where Abba Shaul says, right? Abba Shaul says, no, I think here too, af b'shlishit matrinbo. The 3rd time also you warn him again. The 4th time, revi'it konsinoto lekipa. The 4th time you put in the kippah. Now this, of course, is a question according to everybody, because here, right, you don't have makot. So you can't say the reason you need a 4th time, according to Abba Shaul, is because the 3rd time was not enough because you didn't punish him, right? Meaning until after you punished him the 3rd time. Here, you're not punishing him at all. So why would anybody say you need to do it 4 times to make a chazakah? Nobody says 4 times is needed for chazakah. So hatam malkut leka, there's no makot. So how do you explain this? So what exactly are they arguing about? Amar Ravina says, Ravina, you're right. What they're arguing about is another detail, which is the kipat shricha hatra'ah miflagi. The question here is whether even this sort of extrajudicial, I'm calling it extrajudicial, it's not extrajudicial, it's extra Torah judicial kind of thing. It's a Rabbanan. Rashi says it must be halacha Moshe Sinai. We'll see in a second, there's a little smach in a pasuk. But this sort of extra usual punishment of person in kippah, the question is, do you have to warn them before you do even that, right? And Abba Shaul is of the opinion that you have to warn a person, so that if he does it basically 2 times and you don't warn him, saying, oh, if you do this again, you're going to get punished, right? You just give him the regular punishment, then they wouldn't be chazakah. It's only the 3rd time that he does it, right? And the 3rd time you say to him, wait a second, if you do this again, next time we're actually we can't kill you in the regular way because we didn't give you, you don't acknowledge the hatra'ah that we give, but I want you to know you're gonna be killed. And he still does it, then even then you have to put him in the kippah, but 3 times would not be enough. And so that's the machloket in the second braita. Ask the Gemara, what is kippah? Meaning, and we're asking really, what is the sort of, what do we mean by the word kippah? What does it mean? My kippah. Amar Rav Yehuda, kippah means melo komata. It means the height of a person, right? Or his height, meaning basically it's the height of the person, but it's like solitary confinement. You can't move, right? So you're basically stuck in that place. It's your height, but you can't move maybe side to side at all. And of course, ultimately the person dies in there. Heicha remiza. Now, where in the world do you have a remez that we can kill people outside of the regular way of killing them if either they do things many times and don't seem to be stopped by makod, or they don't acknowledge that hatra'ah, so we just can't kill them? Amar Reish Lakish, the pasuk says in Tehillim, Timotet Rasha Ra'ah, that a person who's a Rasha will be killed. Ra'ah will kill that person, right? So meaning that a person who does ra'ah ultimately get killed for that. Again, there's many psukim that say this, but this is the kind of pasuk that refers to that, which is that even a person who is not warned properly or doesn't acknowledge the warning, if they keep doing it and the courts determine that they're going to keep doing this and they're not salvageable, we can kill them, not actively, so to speak, but passively, by putting them into this room, feeding them bad food so that they're unhealthy and that they ultimately die. Now, before we get to the next Mishnah, which we'll go into this in a little more detail, we have a little interlude where it says Reish Lakish, Amar Reish Lakish, one last statement, one line before the Mishnah, while we're on the topic, there's a pasuk, a very interesting pasuk in Kohelet that says, Ki gam lo yeda adam et ito, a person doesn't know his time to be killed, basically, Ki dagim shenechazim b'mitzuda ra'ah, like fish that are captured in a mitzuda, means a trap, that's ra'ah, that's bad. Right? Meaning people, fish are swimming around, they don't really realize that the walls are closing in around them, right? But what's a mitzuda ra'ah? What's a bad trap as opposed to a good trap, right? So it says Reish Lakish, Amar Reish Lakish chika. That's referring to a hook, right? There's one way to get killed as a fish. You get trapped in a rope in a net. But if you get a hook, then you basically, Rashi says that I think Rashi says it here, that a very tiny hook can capture a very big fish, right? Yeah, it's
There's no
Rashi.
Rashi there.
Rashi all the way in the bottom. He says a hook that's chalash bekatan can capture a big ochezbo dagim gidolim. It can capture a very big fish with a very small hook. So that is a bad way to die, an unexpected way. Continues the Mishnah. We'll try to, let's keep going. We got plenty of time. I don't have time till what? Hareg nefesh b'shelo be'edim. Let's say a person kills somebody without witnesses. Now, the Gemara's going to ask how you know they killed them. But you're confident that he killed them, but there's no witnesses, so you can't kill him. But he's a murderer. So what do? Says our Mishnah, that's the kind of person that you put into this kippah. The purpose of the kippah is to punish someone who we can't find an exact rationale to punish. Now, in the kippah, you feed him lechem tsar umayim lachatz, which means, it's a quote from the pasuk of, meaning, what's lechem tsar? Like, a little bit. Tsar means a tiny bit of bread and a small amount of water, meaning you feed him a very small amount until he dies. It says the Gemara, what do you mean? How do you know he killed him? And Ayadina. What do you mean he killed someone without witnesses? How do you know he killed him? Amarav, no, it's talking about a case where you know that you can't rely on the witnesses. For example, a case of edut miyuchedet. We're going to have this case later. I think we had it before, where you have 2 witnesses who saw it, but they saw each one on their own, each individual witness, meaning one from one window, one from the other window. That's not enough because they don't know about each other. We'll see about this more in Makot, to kill the person. But they clearly saw it, right? They come to court and they say, I saw this person kill someone. Someone else came and saw the same thing. So you can't kill the person based on that, but you know he's a murderer. So then you would kill him this other way. Shmuel says, no, it's much simpler. It's shelo b'hatra'ah. It's where they didn't give him proper hatra'ah. But he knew it was wrong. Well, you have to obviously know that he knows it was wrong, but they didn't go through the right process. And when they didn't go through the right process, they can't convict him. And Rav Chisda Rav Dimi said, Kigon, let's say, no, it's a different case. It's Kigon it kachush bebedikot. The two witnesses who come to say he killed someone, they contradict each other with the bedikot. Remember, the bedikot are like the very small details, like what color, well, maybe what kind of tree was on top of him, which we'll have in a second. So they didn't remember. One said it was an apple tree, one said it was a pear tree, but lo it kachush bechakirot. Remember we had the chakirot earlier, the essential things, what day, what time, those they were absolutely on the same page. So there, Kiditzanan, as we had earlier, Maaseu Badak Ben Zakai, Uksei Te'inim. Remember, there was a time where Ben Zakai tested a person with even Uksei Te'inim. So if you recall, we said earlier that for capital punishments, you don't accept witnesses if they contradict even the bedikot. But the court knows that all the essentials were the same, right? This one of them forgot whether he had 2 buttons on a shirt or 3 buttons on a shirt. That's not something that would really change our opinion on whether he actually murdered him. And so since we're confident that he murdered him, we have to punish him. And the way we punish him is not by saif, because we can't do that, but we put him into this kippah and we give him a little bit of food. It says the Gemara, why in this Mishnah, the second Mishnah, we said the Ketani notum alechem tzar mayim lachatz, u'mashna hatam in the first Mishnah, the Ketani machilin oto sa'or not shukreso mitbagat. Before we said you give him barley. Which one is it? You give him a little bit of grain, a little bit of barley. Like what do you do? How do you kill someone? Hamar sheishet idi v'idi notim lo. You give him both. Meaning you give him first lechem tzar mayim lachatz. You give him a tiny bit of rations, a little bit of bread, a little bit of water. Ad yuktan me'eno. Right, his stomach and his intestines cramp down. They're like when you don't eat for a long time, they get very, very small, as everyone knows. Hopefully, no one has gone through this kind of level of starvation. But hadar, then once he's starved, then machilinoto soranat shkreso mitbakat. You give him barley, and unfortunately, he eats a lot. He drinks a lot of water, and it absorbs the water. And as we all know, the terrible stories that happen to people who are refed too quickly, his stomach will blow up, and he will die. So it's a very miserable way to die, and it's what Beit Din does to this person. Now, while we're on the topic, I'm going to read a little more. Is that okay? 5 more minutes? We got it. Okay, let's finish the daf. I don't know who can join tomorrow. It's going to be early in the morning. Continues the Mishnah, Hagonev et a kisva. Person who steals a kisva. Now, we don't exactly know what a kisva is right now. We're going to discuss in the Gemara. It's part of the avodah in the Beit HaMikdash. And amikalel b'kosem, someone who curses Hashem, but not as we said earlier. Remember, you said Yake Yosi et Yosi, and you have to use the name of Hashem to curse the name of Hashem. Here they use a kosem. A kosem means like a wizard or a sorcerer, or like their own magic. So a person curses Hashem through some other magician or some other deity, let's say, or Boel Aramit. We'll see why we bring these all together. A person who sleeps with a non-Jew. All of these cases, the Torah doesn't say you can kill that person. But you know what? If someone around you is horrified by your act, kana'im pogimbo, the zealots can kill that person. Of course, this brings to mind the case of Pinchas, right? Who was that case of Boel Aramit. Kohen sheshimesh betuma. Now, let's say a Kohen Gadol, not Kohen Gadol, a Kohen goes to the Beit HaMikdash and does avodah, and he doesn't care. He's tamei. That's a huge capital thing. But the Torah does not say you kill that person. Says the Mishnah, his brothers, the Kohanim, did not bring him to court. Ella, they brought him out back. The kids, right, the enforcers, would bring him out behind the Azara, and they bash his head in with pieces of wood. Meaning they took justice into their own hands. Zar sheshimesh b'mikdash. Now that's a Kohen who's tamei. What about if one guy who's a zar, who's not even a Kohen, walks into Beit HaMikdash and does avodah? Rabbi Kiva says, no. In fact, that's bechenek. That person, and we'll see in the Gemara, is covered by a mita of Shemayim, not Shemayim, of the Torah. And the Chachamim say, no, that's mita b'dei Shemayim, and we wouldn't kill him. Again, we'll discuss all this in the Gemara. But let's just do the first two till the end.
How do you get to this Aramit? There are thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, maybe that people who had quote married or had relations with a non-Jewish woman, and then she converts, then she becomes a Jew. So what? Many cases of this. So she converts later on, becomes Jewish. So they kill him because he had a relation with her.
Because our Mishnah does not say you kill him. Our Mishnah says that a kanai, a zealot, has the right, like Pinchas did with Zimri, to go over and kill that person. Court
I,
does not do anything. There's no punishment from the court. The Gemara tomorrow, we'll get there, talks about more details. So let's hold off.
but it's for Kanai and both. Yeah, that would mean he would be entitled to do so. But we see many cases where people converted later on. They got quote. So I mean, I don't know how you bring it. It's very strange here.
Okay, let's learn the Gemara tomorrow. You might still have your question at the end, but let's learn it anyways. Now, ask the Gemara first. My kisva. What is a kisva? What does it mean you stole a kisva? I'm Rav Yehuda Kli Sharet. That means a kli from the Beit Hamikdash. You went in, you took one of the kilim. V'cheinu omer bet kisot hanesach. All right. It says that it calls the nesach the kisot and you kisvot. I think we read the vav. Ve'echra miza. Now, where in the world is it a remiss that you kill someone or you can kill someone by kanaim if they steal from the Beit Hamikdash? Because the pasuk says, "V'lo yavo lerot kivala et hakodesh v'metu." They won't come to you when you're vala. Now, vala there means something different, but here we understand vala to mean balua, like you swallow up, you steal, you take something from the Beit Hamikdash. Then there is a kanai who can be pogeh and kill that person. Mikalel b'kosem. Tani Rav Yosef. What that means is you said yaket kosem et kosmo. You said my kosem, my sorcerer, my god should curse or should hit its creator, right? Meaning God. Or you say Rabbanan v'tem Rabba bar Mari Amri. You say yaket kosem lo. The kosem should kill that person, right? You're angry at someone who cut you off in traffic. You ulekono ulemikano. To you and the one who's basically the kono, right? His creator, or the mikano, which mikano means the one who provides for the person. But again, synonyms for Hashem. But basically, a person says, my kosem should curse or should hit him and his God. So that is considered to be an attack on Hashem, but it's not the capital punishment of mikalel, and therefore you don't punish that person from court. But if a kanai feels motivated to, that kanai is allowed to kill that person. Now, it's a very open thing. Who's a kanai? When can they do it? Can we punish the kanai for doing it? So tomorrow we're going to get into this in more detail, of course, with the model of Pinchas, but we have many, many other details to talk about, not just tomorrow, but we're going to keep going. So unfortunately, for Miriam, maybe, I'm going to Baltimore for a l'chaim tomorrow. So I don't know if you...
Mazel tov. I don't know. My class is starting an hour later because we're changing the clock tonight.
Right, so we're changing the clock.
So it just will depend on what time I get up and if I have daven first. That's it.
Our plan tomorrow morning is to learn at 7:45 a.m. in the new clock, which is, I guess, daylight savings time.
Yeah.
So that will be 6:45 a.m. for those keeping score. So I hope everyone wakes up early and can make it. I know Charlie's going to be the first one there. Okay, everyone.
How do you how does this? I mean, I don't understand. If it says he's a kosem, but kono, who kono? So how does it say? It says he can hit him, right? Yakeo kosem lo. Right?
Remember,
how do we address God in this anthropomorphic sense? He can't actually physically strike him.
Yaket, right. So Yaket is the terminology we used earlier. Remember, if you recall, about Mikalel, that's what we called for a curse. It's not clear if we used those words. Remember, we had it earlier. Yaket Yosi et Yosi was the kinoi we used earlier. But that's how you curse. You're saying they should be struck, they should be attacked, they should get something bad should happen, or whatever the language is. So that's what you said here, basically, that my kosem, this person speaking, should hit that person who you're angry with, and that person's God, and that person's Jewish. So that therefore, you might be Jewish too, but that is therefore the description. You're saying it, as Rashi says, to the koneh et olam, the one who is the...
Okay, I understand what koneh or koneh means, but still the word yakeh is euphemistic or anthropomorphic. It really doesn't. I mean, you can't really hit God.
No, right, correct. You cannot hit God. You can't curse God either, but you can.
No. Well, wait a second. There's a difference, but you really physically can't hit God. One could, with verbiage, could theoretically, could practically, in fact, curse God, but you can't hit him. You can't hit God.
Right. So again, it's not clear what you said. You might have said, I curse. We use in the Gemara, instead of saying the word curse, because we don't like to say it, we use the word yakeh. That's what we had earlier.
I know that, but well, okay, I know what you're saying, but But still, he does use the word mikalel. We use them all over the Chumash. We use mikalel.
Correct. The Gemara doesn't like to use it, but it does use it in times when we have to, right? Okay, I hope to see you tomorrow morning at 7:45 a.m. Just have a good night.